And next up is ChronoTemplar, a currently liberated adventure written by Bert Renlaw. It is 431 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. You don't always get a second chance unless you're a pawn for an eldritch horror that A, can bend time, and B, is a sore loser. Thyme is not a good man, nor one destined for glory. He was meant to die in obscurity, yet another level 82 Templar that was just about to get chewed up by a horde of skittering monstrosities clawing at humanity's last enclave. One short conversation with the time-splitting monstrosity later, and Justin finds himself flung 5 years into the past, right when the Earth was first chosen to host the 9,947th Gladiatorial Games. Justin must now do all he can to help save the world from crumbling under the twin pressures of monsters and murderers. But it's not all grinding experience, getting the most levels and kicking the most ass. He can't even stand out too much lest he draw the attention of the other eldritch horrors observing Earth's struggles for their amusement. No, it's all about making the right connections, sowing the seeds of hope, and calling the pests causing despair. Oh, and exploring the hell of the system with his borrowed ability to tweak time to his advantage. Okay. The first 25% of the story is an absolute slog. But it gets better. It really does. After the 20% mark, the story loses a lot of the things that issues with, and it continues on to be like interesting and well developed, and it essentially redeemed itself for me. So I enjoyed it overall. It's just that the first section of it is challenging structurally and storytelling-wise, and I'll get into why. The first 10% of the story, absolutely tedious. No way about it. It sets up a regressive story using an alien that lost a bet on how long humanity would last on their instigated RPG apocalypse to send the main character back in time to help people do better. Then once back on Earth, at the very start of the RPG apocalypse, it's a huge info dump about game mechanics instead of any kind of emotional response or character development with somebody who's gone back in time to the very start of the RPG apocalypse. And that was probably my biggest issue with like the first 10%, particularly, but also the first 25%. I think there's a huge amount of info dumping of like specific mechanics, the main character knowing a bunch of stuff about the classes and the information and just kind of regurgitating it to the reader. Eventually that tapers off, and that the author's writing style changes to showing instead of just like this blocks and blocks of text about, oh, this is the class, this is what it's possible for them to do. Not that they're necessarily going to do it, but just for your reader, just so you know they can, or like just pages and pages of information on their items and all their items, or like multiple pages of every single change to a character sheet. Or I should say, there's one change, like you get new powers, a new power level, whatever. But you see all the previous text. I'm like, oh, you probably didn't need to have all that text information there. 7 pages of or 2-3 pages of class information every single time he levels when there's only like one change, or like one skill up. And a lot of that happens repeatedly in the story. But after that 20% mark, it's a lot better. It's a lot less info dumpiness. The story still does some minutia sometimes, but a lot of that goes away. The fights are really good throughout the entire story as the main character gets a team and he faces foes that are his equal, and that doesn't really occur until after the 25% mark as well. Before that, he's really dominating, and it's not really a challenge at all for any of the stuff that he's doing. And a lot of the story actually revolves about not just him like fighting PvP characters or players who are taking him under the apocalypse to the expanded experience of killing people instead of monsters. But there is a bit of like him seeing like the timeline and how it's changing. And I think I like that aspect the most, because in a lot of regression stories, you don't get that larger view of how someone who travels back to the past can change the world on a large scale. And even though like it isn't always explained the best and like how the main character knows this information, it is conveyed to the reader that the main character does change the future from how it was in the past, and he's having these positive moments, and how the Earth is having a better chance to survive against like this RPG apocalypse that's brought upon for the amusement of aliens in like waves of monsters and stuff. And there's a lot of like good details about how its system works and all on the RPG side of things. That's all really well done. But I think I like that aspect the best, and that you get to see kind of a wider view of how the world changes because of what he's doing, how he's conveying the best way to level, the best way to fight, the best ways to the right people, and then it's spreading gradually, and countries are combining, and there are specific things happening, and how that benefits them, and how that conversely changes the difficulty level of the RPG apocalypse and the corresponding effects of that. All really good stuff. I really enjoyed all that, but it just takes a little while to kind of get to that good stuff, about 25% or so. So the story itself, a little rough on times, but in the beginning, but again, it redeems itself for me, and I really got into it, and I really had a good time with it. So if you find yourself struggling in the beginning, just know that it does get better. And I think most people really enjoy this RPG apocalypse story with, the main character who has an ability to travel back in time. He has some like time regression powers as well. So good stuff. Gonna get a score of 7.2 out of 10 for me. Loses a few decimals because of that hard, rough start, but overall had a good time with it. ChronoTemplar, a crunchy liberty adventure with a score of 7.2 out of 10.